what's going on. But there's a huge siren. People don't seem to be reacting, so I'll continue my route to get something to eat. But maybe there's a massive threat. It sounds like World War II or something.
Suddenly the sirens go off, but we don't register that.
On my screen here that you see was the alert.
I got the Alert Carolina text that there was an active shooter, so I sprinted immediately back to my room.
I was sitting behind desks like this in hopes of stopping anything from coming at us.
A lot of rumors swirling about like how many people had been shot, where the gunman was he arrested, was he not?
Oh my days. There's a dangerous person. Oh my days. America.
I'm Kelly Kendall. Thank you for joining us for a special edition of Carolina Week. Today, team coverage, an in-depth look at what happened on this campus on August 28th, the day that left one faculty member dead and rocked an entire campus. As students on this campus, we have personal connections to these stories. We'll walk you through what we've learned about that day, the facts, the impact, the politics, the future for us here on this campus. But first, we begin with the investigation. Our Stephen Schlink has the latest.
I was here in the Curtis Media Center during the lockdown on August 28th. My fellow journalism students and I were walking around the room, looking out the windows, trying to figure out what was going on. Many of us even did interviews with local news to get information out of what we were experiencing firsthand. We had many questions of what was going on that day, and now months later, we have even more questions of what happened on our campus.
Okay, we're gonna go inside.
It's been more than 3 months since a shooter opened fire at UNC, killing one and sending the campus into turmoil. Since that day, we've been asking questions.
Can you all speak to what kind of correlation that has to this?
Yes, a car was identified. We do think that it is related.
That was UNC Police Chief Brian James on August 28th, just hours after the lockdown was lifted. Months later, he took questions from student journalists via Zoom.
When can we expect more information on the investigation?
Information will become more public as that process plays out in the court system.
While the chief isn't publicly giving many details on the investigation, we've learned a lot from our own digging. We put in 10 records requests. We received nearly 400 pages of documents in response, and a warning. Some of the details may be disturbing, but we feel it's important to understand what occurred that day. We know the 911 call came in at 12:58 p.m.
There's an active shooter on campus. Okay, stay on the line with me, don't hang up.
Then at 1:03 p.m., the entire campus went into lockdown for more than 3 hours as police searched for the suspect. Police communication reports revealed there was some concern the alleged shooter might harm other professors. Those reports also revealed there were other calls reporting more shots fired.
A few minutes ago, I heard multiple gunshots sounding a little bit further away from campus.
Those reports were false. Text message records we received show the moment Chief James told Chancellor Kevin Guskowitz the suspect was in custody at 3:37 p.m., nearly an hour after communication reports show the suspect was apprehended. We've also obtained the autopsy report. It shows the victim, Zajay Yan, a UNC professor, was shot 7 times, including gunshot wounds to the head, abdomen, and arms. He died at the scene. The incident began behind me in Professor Yan's office inside of Caudle Labs, and it ended here, just 2 miles north of campus off of Williams Circle. We've learned quite a bit since that day, but key details still have not been released. Details like a motive, or even where the gun is. So we reached out to gun violence prevention expert Chris Grolnick for his thoughts.
We probably will never know the real story.
But his assessment at this point:
something went wrong in the dynamics between the person that decided to use a gun to solve his grievance and the person who became a victim.
The alleged shooter made his 3rd court appearance in November. After undergoing 2 psych evaluations, he has been deemed unfit to stand trial and will undergo treatment for mental issues. But according to legal experts we spoke to, this doesn't necessarily mean he will never face trial. In Chapel Hill, Stephen Schlink reporting.
Thanks, Stephen. Back on campus, faculty and staff were processing the events and making decisions on how to proceed with the lockdown.
I do have to admit that I'm one of those people who had never had a drill. I mean, I heard about how students were telling faculty, this is what you should be doing. I wasn't in the classroom, so I wasn't in that situation. I just read about it afterwards. So being aware of what you need to do during a lockdown, which you guys grew up with, but my generation did not, that's something we all need to know, unfortunately.
And then there were those who know tragedy all too well. Our Noelle Harris joins us with that story.
I was here in class in the Curtis Media Center when the gunman fired shots on August 28th. I witnessed students jump from the building behind us out of this window right here. And while this was my first experience with a school shooter, there are others on campus who have experienced this before.
UNC senior Bella Miller is often at the gym as a student athlete, but on August 28th, when the Carolina alert went off, Miller was in class.
I just was like, wow, I'm gonna text my mom again that there's another shooting at my school. Like, how ironic. Like, just keeps happening.
The other shooting she's talking about, the day a gunman opened fire at her school in Parkland, Florida, 5 years ago.
Definitely a crazy thing to go through in my first year of high school. I mean, you're expecting it to be like all High School Musical, Rainbow's musical, and I got 17 of my classmates and peers dead instead.
Miller has had one too many close calls with deadly school shootings. Upon graduation from Marjory Stoneman Douglas, she had a sports scholarship to attend Michigan State, where a gunman shot and killed 3 people in February.
Thank God I didn't go there. I would have had to gone through this all over again.
Months later, however, a deadly shooting took her right back to the horrific moments in Parkland.
The fact that my professor wouldn't stop teaching and wouldn't really even lock down our classroom was just really triggering for me, because I was like, someone can walk in here at any minute and we would have absolutely nothing to do.
Miller said the shootings have taken a toll on her mental health, something only those who have survived shootings can only understand.
The fact that this problem is so ongoing, and even since I was a 15-year-old, I'm now 20, I've seen almost no change. And it's slightly sickening that kids just have to keep dying until someone decides that they want to change something.
Change is something Miller believes can only be made by lawmakers.
Being a survivor of shootings for me kind of gives me a reason to keep pushing. There's a lot of people that I knew who don't have the ability anymore because they're gone.
As for decision makers at UNC, she'd like to see improvements in their communication efforts. And students, she says, should speak up, tell their stories, and explain what's going on.
Miller plans on getting involved in the fight against gun violence when she graduates from UNC. In Chapel Hill, I'm Noelle Harris.
The Asian American community is also one that felt the impact in its own way. The suspect was Asian and the victim was Asian. After the shooting, many in the Asian community felt they became the subject of hateful rhetoric. 3 months later, we checked in with some in the community to see where things stand now.
An Asian person that now also hurt someone and caused a lot of that led to a lot of turmoil and distress in our school. Walking around, it's kind of hanging above me like a cloud.
Because in 2023, I don't think that we should be holding an entire race accountable for the actions of one person, no matter how tragic the situation was.
Much of the hateful rhetoric that came after the deadly shooting was found on social media. Social media helped get the word out, but it also spread false rumors, from false claims of multiple shooters to false claims of multiple victims. Muhsin Mahmood reports on the role social media played during and after the crisis.
I was walking through campus by the alumni building when the school shooting happened. I remember being confused, not knowing where to go, what to do, or where to hide. Social media played a key role during UNC school shooting. It's what informed many students and the general public that lockdown was taking place. It captured the live and post reactions from students, but with that came a lot of misinformation and disinformation. Rumors during the lockdown were flying across different platforms, from Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and Yik Yak. Yik Yak is a platform which allows you to anonymously connect with everyone at your college, and is the anonymity which lended itself to being the hotspot for unverified information. We reached out to Yik Yak for a comment, but the company did not respond for this story. Sophomore student Jaden Willem says he was using Yik Yak to stay up to date during the lockdown.
Some saying that he had like several guns on him. Another one was saying like more than 2 hours before they actually had the suspect in custody, they said we have him in custody.
And in group chats, claims of a classroom being held hostage, 10 people dead. Another saying 2 people dead, 10 injured or shot. Another saying it was a chemistry student killed. Claims which all proved to be false.
If you're hearing specific facts about number of people injured, people killed, where a shooter might be, all of that information, it just seems ends up to be inaccurate.
Catherine Schwei is the creator of the Active Shooter program for the FBI. What role and impact does misinformation have when it comes to an active school shooting situation?
When the rumors go out and you're sitting in a room afraid to leave, then in your mind, there's a shooter at every doorway. When in reality, we know that's not what occurs. It isn't what occurred at UNC. We had an individual who came onto campus, went to his target, killed his target, and left.
A standstill followed moments of chaos. I happened to be recording the exact moment when the sirens went off. I don't know what's going on, but there's a huge siren. People don't seem to be reacting, so I'll continue my route. Announcing a dangerous and armed person on campus. Maybe there's a massive threat. It sounds like World War II or something. Okay, stopped.
Armed, dangerous person, go inside. Repeat. Armed, dangerous person, go inside.
Go inside. It says, oh my days. There's a dangerous person. Oh my days. America. That video reached over 15 million people online. My camera was still rolling right here, capturing every single thought running through my mind. And the faces of everyone walking in through this door, trying to work out what was going on.
Guys, I think we should just close it and lock it. Yeah. At this point.
Once in the classroom, we hid under desks, feared for our lives, and texted loved ones.
I've had lots of trainings in this. I have to go later, okay?
And the conversation continued, even after the lockdown was lifted. We ran analytics on over 17,000 comments from that viral video. The sheer impact to individuals is clear. Among the most frequent word to come up in the comments was people. But when we analysed the most common topics to come up in the video, we found a huge proportion of them to be extremist, racist, Nazi-related, and varying debates about guns.
It's a learning process. 10 years ago, we didn't have to worry that people were getting all their information from social media and sharing it.
As discussions continue on causes and solutions to school shootings, it's clear that it's going to involve learning how best to use social media to contain misinformation. Musim Mahmood, Carolina Week, Chapel Hill.
Coming up next on this special edition of Carolina Week.
I support any effort to make sure that training is made available.
Our team talked to local, state, and national leaders and asked them the tough questions. Could this shooting have been prevented? Their answers just ahead. Welcome back to this special edition of Carolina Week. All semester long, we've been covering what some have called a successful response to the crisis, but what others have called a failure in communication. Our Mayor Famet reports on the response that impacted the community beyond the Carolina campus.
I was here in my media management class when I saw police with their guns drawn. What I saw here had a greater impact far beyond this campus.
So what we did is we grabbed all the desks and we pushed them against the door.
Stephen Alonzo was in class in Murphy Hall.
It was like us sitting behind desks like this.
Confused and scared, like so many students that day. The concern that followed was evident in findings from a survey released by the university this week. More than 3,000 responded to an online portal asking for feedback on the university's response. Alert Carolina was often mentioned, specifically a desire for more frequent messages in sharing the location of the incident, requiring more training, especially for faculty and staff, and ensuring building safety with door locks and specific plans.
There is glass panes that they can easily see, so that really wouldn't inhibit anybody from coming in.
And those aren't the only calls for change. The police chief in a board of trustees meeting told leaders he wants to consolidate camera systems and reduce blind spots, install license plate readers, and enhance partnerships with other law enforcement agencies. Josmel Perez of the Center for Latinx Students pointed out another concern.
Anytime that those alert messages come out from Alert Carolina, it's always a sense of panic. It's just normal human reaction to worry about, well, what does this mean? It's another added layer when you don't know the language. And so it's a misservice that we are not able to provide the bilingual messaging for
that day. He worried about those who did not understand the language. He also worried about something else beyond the campus.
On a personal note, I have a fourth grader who she understood a little bit more, but it was a kindergarten, our middle daughter is a kindergartner who really struggled with it.
Not far from campus, students at Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools also went on lockdown.
I think the lag of communication between major stakeholders and the public was slower than what the situation needed. There are students here that are dual enrolled at Chapel Hill, at UNC Chapel Hill. So you want to stop movement. You want to make sure everybody is positioned with high quality information.
August 28th proved what happened at the university doesn't just affect those on campus, it can impact the entire Carolina community.
Thanks, Mayor. Continuing our team coverage, our Lauren Lovett took those questions and concerns to university officials.
I was here at home when a gunman fired shots on campus. I immediately jumped on my phone and started sending texts to my friends and checking social media. I was completely unaware of what was happening or what the protocols or policies were for something like this. And that is something that I've been looking into for a while now.
During the first press conference hours after the deadly shooting, university officials acknowledged.
And even the best laid plans, as you know, in protocols, sometimes they don't play out as you'd like to, but I'm very pleased with what we know at this point. We'll have an opportunity to review that, learn from the investigation.
We've continued to ask about the investigation.
And what has the university learned from its response?
The protocols.
Many students are asking what protocols are even in place for these situations.
And potential improvements. And for the first time in months, university officials agreed to speak to us via Zoom.
In the emergency preparedness guide, it says that faculty is supposed to go over the preparedness plans within the first 10 days of a semester. So how are you implementing this going forward?
Actually has been a practice that has been in place for some years now. And we really pushed that initiative at the start of the spring semester.
I have not seen that in any of my classes. So I was just wondering, how are you implementing this in the classroom?
I do want to note the implementation of it in the classroom is more of an action on the side of the schools. So our responsibility on the campus safety side is to ensure that we have the information and the guides available to them. And then also provide any training that they might need.
University officials encourage active shooter training, but still don't require it of students or faculty and staff. UNC Police Chief Brian James has said he would support making the training mandatory, likely something that would need to be virtual given the large population on campus.
We believe that the more people that are trained, not only in active shooter, but various other emergency incidents that may arise, that we're going to be a safer campus.
When it comes to safety or emergencies, the university uses its Alert Carolina system for communication. It was used 5 times during the 3-hour lockdown on August 28 to communicate with the community.
The emergency notification system, there are standard messages that we have to deliver to our campus community to meet federal guidelines and requirements. What we don't want the system to be perceived as is breaking news or just some general information source.
Specifically with the frequency of messages during the lockdown, a lot of students felt like they were not frequent enough. What is being changed about that? And also with people not being able to understand the messages, is there a possibility that they will be offered in other languages in the future?
We are looking into that. We are not in a place right now to render what our corrective action is because The formal after-action review process is underway, but I can say that the communication specifically as it relates to our alert is one of the top categories that we're closely assessing to make sure that we make any necessary improvements to that.
When the deadly shooting occurred, I was about half a mile away at my sorority house. I could hear law enforcement and the chaotic response. I listened intently to what leaders had to say then and now as I sat down with the university's chancellor to find out what's next for the university. My first question for you is, in the press conference immediately following the August 28th shooting, you said that there were lessons to be learned. And now, a little over 3 months later, I'm wondering what you would say those lessons have been.
Well, let me just say that you prepare for days like that we had on August 28th, and you hope you never have to activate a plan. We learned that we might be able to enhance our communication plan around it, and we made some adjustments around that we saw and that went into effect 16 days later when unfortunately we had to have a second lockdown. The active shooter training option, we want to look at ways to increase the number of individuals that are taking that active shooter training, and most likely I am in support of us requiring that of our students, faculty, and staff. And so we're working on that right now.
Well, you also just said yourself, and I know Chief Brian James has also said that he is in favor of mandatory active shooter training. And I also want to make a note for our viewers that the incident report came out and that feedback from the portal. And that also indicated that the Carolina community is largely in favor of it. But that still hasn't happened at the university yet. And I'm wondering what's holding the school back.
So that feedback, we had about 3,700 responses. I was very pleased that so many people offered up their feedback around their experience. Like I said, there's no perfect response to it. And part of that will be how would we develop and implement a mandatory active shooter training process.
Right. Well, as you said, I mean, we're going to know a lot more in the spring about what happened. We already know a lot more today about what happened. But one question that I have is, could this shooting have been prevented?
There are sort of three areas that we are focused on right now. The first is, the actual response, some of the things we just talked about. What can we improve upon, whether it's around communication, whether it's around the trainings that should be put into place. The second area is around the physical space. What could we do better to not just locking down facilities, but also thinking about the way in which we would route traffic, and whether it's pedestrian traffic or cars around campus, to try to prevent some of the chaos that can ensue in an event like that. And then I think the third area is perhaps the one that you're referring to, and that is what are the root causes of an event like that, and we're focused on that as well, and taking a real close look to see if something could have been prevented there in this situation.
Chancellor Kevin Guskiewicz, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much.
Let's now look at the facts, the numbers on gun violence. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, more than 13,000 Americans are killed on average each year by firearms, which includes an alarming number within schools. Education Week tracks school shootings, and they say since 2018, there have been 180 K-12 school shootings with casualties, 121 dead, and 316 injured. But when it comes to colleges and universities, research on shootings that occur on campuses is limited. According to the crowdsourced Gun Violence Archive, since March of last year, there have been at least 24 documented gun-related homicides on college campuses. And some perspective for you, school shootings outside the U.S. are exceptionally rare. The U.S. has 57 times as many school shootings as other developed countries combined. For years, politicians across the state and country have been pledging to address the growing gun violence crisis. We've asked politicians across the state and in our nation's capital what they plan to do now.
Second Amendment is not about gun hunting. It's about the people's ability to protect themselves.
When we come back, let's talk the politics of gun violence. Welcome back. Let's talk the politics of guns. Legislatures in our state offered their thoughts and prayers after the shooting on UNC's campus, but no new gun bills have passed the General Assembly since the shooting. Legislation was proposed and passed earlier this year, however. Carolina Week's Walter Renke examined these bills and asked legislatures about the future of gun control in North Carolina.
I was in my off-campus apartment about 2 miles that way when the shooting happened. I remember watching the news and listening to the police scanner with my roommate to try to figure out what was going on. But a couple days later, I talked to Senator Greg Meyer right here in front of Caldwell Labs. The Orange County Democrat said that Democrats in our state have been trying to pass more gun legislation for years, but have been rebuffed by Republicans at every turn. Now, several months later, we talk politics yet again.
I mean, nothing has happened in the General Assembly that would make any bit of difference to trying to prevent another incident like the August 28th shooting.
That's Senator Greg Meyer. He's a Democrat representing Orange County, home to UNC Chapel Hill. To get the Republican side, I traveled to Henderson, North Carolina, a small town in Vance County just south of the Virginia border. I'm here to talk to Representative Frank Sossaman, who just finished his first year in the General Assembly.
What has happened in the General Assembly since August 28th? Like, have there been any bills or discussions in regards to the shooting or gun policy in our state?
There have been discussion, and there's been ongoing discussions as to what we can do. There hasn't been any bills per se, but I know there's some work sort of behind the scenes on what we can do that will be reasonable, that will be effective.
In March, Senate and House Democrats introduced omnibus bills that would have required a permit to purchase an assault rifle or long gun and created a 3-day waiting period to purchase a gun, among other regulations. Jeffrey Welty, an expert in criminal law and procedure from the UNC School of Government, believes the 3-day waiting period could keep guns out of the hands of people going through a crisis, but it could also harm others.
If you're a person who has an immediate need for a firearm, and what folks often talk about is somebody who's a domestic violence victim, who's moving out and is afraid of their former partner and wants to get a firearm for self-defense, waiting 3 days might be too long.
Democrats also introduced several other gun control bills around the same time that would have allowed law enforcement to destroy confiscated guns, among other regulations. The bills all died in committee.
I wanted to get your thoughts on bills that have been introduced by Democrats to address guns in our state.
I'm sure there have been some. I can't recall.
One gun bill that did pass this session was a Republican-led bill that repealed pistol permits in our state. Republicans overrode Governor Roy Cooper's veto of the bill and passed it into law in March.
And this bill will become law, notwithstanding the objections of the governor?
I voted in favor of the bill primarily because the history of that bill, it's a Jim Crow bill.
According to the Duke Center for Firearms Law, claims that North Carolina's pistol permit law, originally passed in 1919, was purely racist, quote, don't hold up to close historical scrutiny. While Sossaman said he supports taking guns away from the mentally ill, he admits he's not aware of any talks among his party about potential legislation on it.
I think since most of the mass shootings have mental illness in that shooting somewhere, some way, then I would address it from that angle.
Democrats proposed their own red flag law in March. It would have allowed law enforcement to confiscate the guns of anyone proven to be a harm to themselves or others, but it died in committee.
I don't understand why anyone is opposed to red flag laws. And a red flag law is probably the single policy that would have had the most likely chance of stopping the murder that happened on this campus.
And sometimes, as we all know, the devil's in the details. And sometimes if the details can be adjusted, then a law like that can pass.
This year was the 4th consecutive year that Democrats introduced a red flag law in the state legislature, and the 4th consecutive year that it failed. Welty says that North Carolina has a long history of expanding gun rights.
They've tended generally to expand rather than to restrict gun rights in the state.
But many other states have passed their own red flag laws. 21 states in the District of Columbia already have some version of a red flag law. North Carolina is one of 13 states where it has been proposed but not adopted. Meyer says that's because of Republicans.
The Republican Party is completely opposed to any type of restrictions on guns. They seem to prefer to have violence and murder rather than having any type of restriction on firearms.
In response, Sossaman said that kind of thinking prevents bipartisan action from happening.
It's going to be hard for people with that kind of opinion to talk to anybody and try to get something done.
Do you think the legislature has the will to pass more gun control?
I don't believe the current legislature has the will to pass any type of gun safety provisions. As I said, I do believe that there is a role to be played and efforts should be made to bring around enough advocacy and power and pressure to try and change the current legislature.
Sossaman says that he hopes there will be more bipartisan discussion on gun control in the future.
The short session's coming up, but we have to have a lot of things in place prior to, so hopefully there'll be some conversations about these kind of laws that have been addressed, that maybe there can be some success.
In Chapel Hill, I'm Walter Rinke, Carolina Week.